Yeah.
I saw the
You need
last
to-
letter.
Yeah.
Writing is one of my
Then you'll be
favorite things.
published.
Right? Anyways, so you get your piece of wood, it has to be dry, all right? Not this, maybe it's dry, maybe it's not. Get a meter. If you don't have a moisture meter, Harbor Freight, 29 bucks, all right? It's definitely worth it. I always try to dry it to at least 6% or less. The meter, when you stick it in, and if it says 0, it's anywhere between 0 and 6%. But the wood has to be dry. If it's not dry, after you put the resin in, months later, it could be in somebody's house that has a little drier atmosphere, and some moisture gets sucked out of it, and we all know what happens to wood. It moves, and it will separate from the resin. Right? I had that problem at the very, very beginning, and now I dry all my wood in a kiln box and make sure it's at least 6% or less. So, you've got your piece of wood, you've just taken it out, it's dry, you put it on your lathe, you shape the outside of it true. Get it round. Once it's true round, then you look at it and you decide, what am I going to do with this? Are there any cracks in it? If there's a lot of cracks coming off of the pith, you might want to take a Dremel pencil, open those cracks up. If there's nothing wrong with it, like this one basically, I went ahead and I did a flower petal shape, which is basically one ring, which I cut while it's on the lathe. And then anywhere on my lathe, I have 48 indexed on it, so I can go anywhere from 48 down to 4 lines on it. This one, I think I put 8 on it, so I use a router on a sled as a fluting device. Run it through. When you cut your rings, you can't cut through, obviously. If you cut through on a ring, you're going to separate your two pieces. One of the unique things about my work is the piece stays together always. The grains are never moved. When you look at the pieces there, you'll see the grain is where it is. So by not cutting through on the rings, holds it together. Lines going up and down, you can go all the way through. And you can see right here, I went through. On the inside, I've already patched this one up, and I'll toss this one around for you. So, you've got it on the lathe now, it's true. You decided what you're going to do. On this one, I cut my ring. Took me a couple minutes. And then, one at a time, locking in place, I run the router. Run it through, run it through. If we're thick, and I left it nice and thick, I tried not to go through. Mostly on your elbows is where you're going to go through. Doesn't matter. You patch it up like this. Patching is another thing. This is a liquid. It will find a hole, all right? And resin will run. So once it starts to run, stop pouring. Don't try to patch it unless you're really quick and you can get a patch, which is another piece of tape, a 2-inch piece of tape, over the entire thing where the resin has never touched. Once the resin is there, you can't glue it to it. It just won't work. So just stop it, let it drain out. Once it hardens, that will be your blockage, and the next time you do it, you won't have any problems. Okay, so where am I? We've got the piece, you've cut into it. I'll pass this one around. I'll take this piece next, and I'll place it in a tray. Plastic. The resin doesn't stick to plastic. Here's a tray with the resins in it. I let the resin build up. Once the resin gets built up, just like an ice cube, you crack it, pop, pop, pop. Once the whole thing's filled, piece pops out. I've had these now 5-6 years. Huh? I do. Every now and then when I'm making the resin, I'll have an ounce left over, and I have a small container like this, and I'll just pour it in the bottom. And my grandkids like to use it as little shuffleboard pieces, or you can use them as coasters, whatnot. So anyways, once you've cut it, you put it on here so it's not going to move. You make your mixture. I use no more than 8 ounces at a time. I've marked each one of these on the bottom, B, A. These are the actual sticks that I use, nothing fancy, just some wooden sticks. Fill it up. Measuring is very important. You don't want to have more or less of one or the other. Once you have it mixed up, I then use a plastic 10-ounce cup. Pour each one in. Scrape it as best I can. Try to keep this edge smooth. Scrape it, get it in. If there's any particles, dirt, you'll pick those out later. Once you've got it in there, you take your stirring stick. Now this one has had resin. These other two only have the A or the B on them. This way they don't build up heavy on the resin. You mix it in. Once it's clear and the cloudiness has gone away, then I go ahead and I take it and I pour it into little souffle cups. These are 5 ounce. I'm working with 8 ounce. So generally I'll give 3 colors at a time. So I'll break it up into the even amounts that I want. I'm not going to use the resin because it just takes too long to do it right now. The dye, I buy my dye through a company in Gainesville, Florida called Obsessions Resin. They do a lot of jewelry, resin, and they have a lot of different dyes. I found these 2 different types, bright blue and bright red, bright orange is great. And then they have this aluminite, flow green, orange, red, and yellow.
Is there any technique in the mixing or the pouring to reduce air bubbles?
The technique? Yeah, whatever your technique is would be fine if you can figure it out. Bubbles is probably the worst thing. I go back and work on my pieces after I've already finished them, all right? And touch up air bubbles and then work on them by hand. It takes a long time to finish.
You use a heat gun on it to get
I
bubbles
use a
out?
cigarette lighter with a long stick, all right? Problem with a heat gun is it's blowing air, and I don't want it to blow the resin, all right? A lot of times, like on that piece right there that's being tossed around, it's covered. I can't see where the bubbles are. And a lot of times when you open them up afterwards, like on this one, there's air bubbles in here. I know there are. I mean, there's usually there right around the edges. I've tried pouring them this way. I've tried doing them this way. I've even tapped on them to try to move the bubbles. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you get air bubbles. You know, so
You try pressure.
pressure?
Put it in a pressure pot?
No, and I'm probably not gonna because that takes too many pressure pots. Usually when I'm pouring, I'll pour 8 to 9 to 10 pieces at a time. And I'll pour, you know, a quart of resin. And each one of these takes up maybe 5 ounces at a time, depending on how many rings. And I got started just using the rot in the wood. If you do turn a lot of mahogany, you know, you get a lot of that rot in there. All you have to do is just tape up both sides of it. Milk cartons are a great source of damming. Using that rather than just all tape, just cut a big piece of milk carton, plaster it to the sides. You can turn it on its side and just go like this till you get to the middle and leave a little slit in the middle, and then pour it and pour your colors in, mixing it around. I do a couple pieces where it'll be a big target. You've seen me bring that big target in where you're just pouring it and you can see what you're doing. That's great because then you can pour the resin in and make designs. But 99% of the time it's behind the tape and you can't see what the heck's going on. Tape, Gorilla Glue, Gorilla Tape. This stuff's good. It's a cloth tape. The resin does get hot at times, especially if you pour over a pour. All right, it'll get hot. Yeah, bring that up here.
Sure, we haven't seen it over here.
Okay. So, once I've mixed up a batch, a piece like this, I laid on its side, and it was all covered with tape. And then I start just slowly pouring in a little bit at a time of each color. Figure a couple ounces on each side, and then I'll take it and give it the shift And when I see it starting to pour out the hole, I'll go back the other way. This way, when you finish, you'll get this design rather than just layers of resin. You'll get like a watery flow through them. So, you've poured it. Now it's hardened.
How long does your stuff take to harden?
This is 4 hours to the touch, 8 hours cured. I usually give it 2 days because it says to only pour in there an 1/8 of an inch, a 1/16 of an inch, and I'm pouring in a 1/2 inch. As you can see on this piece here, I cut in probably at least a 1/2 inch. You need that. You need to give yourself a lot of play. When your piece is finished, you want it to be a 1/4 of an inch, so if you go a 1/2 inch, that gives you a 1/16 on each side to remove it. So I would take this piece, after I finish taping it up, put it in here, it'll fit in there, level it, pour it in. If nothing leaks out, great. If it leaks, I stop. But eventually I will fill it up to the top. It'll shrink down upon itself. You'll pour in another, at least twice, maybe 3 times, you'll have to pour in each piece. So if you're going for any color schemes, write down what you're pouring into each hole. A lot of times with this design, I'll pour in 1 color to do the bottom ring, or a couple colors on the bottom ring, and then each line coming up, I'll do in a solid color or a pattern of red, green, yellow, orange, and try to do each one the same.
Now on the different pours, you said you do like 2 or 3 pours. Do you let it get hard, or do you let it just get gelled?
You can do it either way. I've done it where I've come back 4 hours later and it's hard, but I know it's not cured, and poured another one right on top of it.
What's your mixture of resin? What's your
50-50.
What's your working time?
35 minutes, maybe 40 minutes. Temperature,
Still pour?
gooey. It gets really gooey after 35 minutes, 40 minutes. And temperature, very important. If you try to pour this stuff below 70 degrees, you're going to run into a lot of problems. It's not going to set right. I've had it way back where it just came apart. It just didn't hold on. So I don't have that problem in my garage because I have my warming box in there, and that's at 110. So a few times this winter where it got real cold, I just couldn't pour. So 70 degrees, 75 is best. And some places say to warm this stuff up in a microwave, but I'm not sticking it in my microwave.
It doesn't have a top end that just messes it up.
I don't want to take the chance of it. I like living with my wife.
When you're pouring it, if it's like 90 or whatever else, that's not a big deal. That's actually beneficial to you.
Oh, yeah. But so now you've poured it, it's hardened, now you got to pull your tape off. So you start pulling the tape off. When you're done, it'll look like this. Solid on the inside. On this one, because I didn't go through, I did rings. You never go through with a ring. If you go through with a ring, you've blown it, all right? So now I'll take this piece,
And
put it
that's
back
about
on the
a
lathe.
1/2 inch deep?
Huh?
Those rings are about a 1/2 inch
At
deep?
least a 1/2 inch.
Okay.
I have my ruler marked off, and
So needless to say,
that's why
you make it
I like to
thick.
leave at least 1.5 inches of meat. I mean, you dry it, just more time removing it. So it goes back on the lathe for the 3rd and final time. This time, you concentrate on the inside. Last time you concentrated on the outside of it. Now you know it's dry. Start removing the wood on the inside. First level off your top. All right? Don't wait until the end to level it off. If you wait, you might have a problem, which happens. It's thin. You start to try to level your top off because it's a little wobbly, and the next thing you know, you have 2 pieces. One's on the floor and one's spinning on your lathe. So level it off while you still have the meat holding it there. Get this square, then start to remove the wood. Keep removing it. You'll hear it as well as see it once you hit that plastic. Okay? You'll hear a scraping sound that's different than the wood, and then you'll see it, just a little flicker. Okay? That's when you want to be very delicate. just start lightly rubbing away the wood. Once you see where the ring is, and on a piece like this where it's flush, it's not an angle,
You using the scraper or a gouge?
I use a gouge. Scraper, the only time I use a scraper is to make the rings. All right? I have a 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch scraper. I'll use a real small gouge. I have a 1/16 of an inch gouge. I'll use that to get the hole started, and then just come in with a nice scraper and finish it off. Get those straight edges, because you want it to look, nice when it's done. It's a big difference between cutting it by hand using a grinder and cutting your rings this way and using this. When you're doing, like the one piece I brought in, I cut by hand with a grinder. The lines are not pristine. It's tough. Your grinders pop around. Anyways,
On those, you're cutting when the lathe.
when the
is
lathe
with
is
a
spinning,
scraper.
all three of these
You're not
rings,
using
no,
the sled.
no. This I only use for
Perpendicular.
Up and down lines. So you keep going until you see your plastic. Once you see all the plastic on the inside, then you go ahead and finish your bottom. All right? Usually there's a lot more meat on the bottom. Finish it off, finish your inside, then go to your outside. Remember now, you have a 1/2 inch of plastic or less. Use calipers so you can see how much plastic you have, and then just start lightly. This one's pretty good. A lot of them are just totally covered with resin. The resin gets under the tape, especially when it's close like this, and it'll be all over. Wear a mask, wear gloves. I know a lot of you guys don't like to wear gloves when you're turning, but this stuff will cut you, all right? When your hand is right next to there and a piece of this plastic comes off and hits your glove, you'll be thankful that it was your glove and not your hand, all right? So it's about eye protection. I've got a whole new helmet. I bought an Algero, or whatever it's called. It's got the hose in the back, hooks up to my air pump, so I have fresh air coming in. I'm sure this stuff is toxic. I'm sure the dust isn't good for you. So when you do it, take that protection too. But when you're turning, you'll see you need a glove on your hand that's close to to where it's turning. Anyways, turn it down as thin as you want. And once it's turned down, just treat it just like you would any other bowl. Start sanding it. Start with 80. I go to 400. My advice is, when you get to the plastic, you'll notice the lighter you touch it, all right, you have to have a nice light touch. I use a 1/4 inch gouge and just softly back and forth until you've got it nice. If there's air bubbles inside, nothing you can do. What I find is sometimes there'll be little air pockets, and as I'm removing the resin, it'll appear. I finish the bowl completely, sand it right down to 400 grit, and then I repair it. The more times you put this thing on the lathe, the more chances you have that it's going to be off-centered. So 3 times, and that's it. Questions? More?
When I went to dental school, we would mix plaster, dye rock, all that stuff. And to get the bubbles on, we'd put the bowl on a vibrator.
Yeah.
They would all come out. I also wonder.
I'm thinking about that. I have a little 4-foot by 2-foot table, and I'm thinking about a vibrator on one of the legs just to
Something.
shake the
I
heck
also
out of
wonder
it.
if you put a suction on one of these cups, would it take the hair out?
It might take the resin too.
No. If you have the resin at the bottom,
Yeah.
put a suction, on top of it. I don't think it'll take this.
The thing is, the resin's inside.
No, he's talking about in the cup before you pour it.
Oh, before you pour it?
Yeah.
That's the thought.
Put it back
You
in.
could give it a shot.
Do you,
I-
do you have a problem with air bubbles a lot or not?
Not that much,
Okay.
and it all depends, I find that when I pour rings and and I, usually when I pour the rings, I do it this way,
Okay, that was my
upside
next
down.
one. How is that positioned when you're pouring?
I've done it both ways. I've done it where I've poured it where it's this way and just taped up to there, all right? And then I've done it where I've done it upside down and I've taken milk carton plastic and made little cups and taped it to the side, all right? The problem with this way is all the weight was bulging and I would find like a saggy diaper type thing, all right? And when you were done, you'd have this big bulge of resin here. So when you're pouring it in, you're going, oh, great, it's filled. And then you turn and you look and, wait, where'd it go? All right? Well, I know where it went. It was bulging here, and you can barely see it because the tape's still holding it. So I started to do it this way and stop the bulge, but the air bubbles can be bad. But vibrating is my next thing.
You mentioned bulge.
So what?
You mentioned that you get a bulge on the bottom.
When they're on the tape, when you have a situation like this, all right?
What if you fill it up, tape it, all three, and then you lay it real slow?
I don't do it on the lathe. I don't do it on the lathe. And if you do use it that way, you have to turn it. I met another turner. His name is John Williams, like the composer, and he was turning bowls that he was using as sinks. All right? Beautiful. And the entire inside of the bowl was resin. And he saw on a video a guy doing it, had a machine, and he built the machine, and I think he said it was 8 revolutions a minute was the perfect speed that kept the resin from rolling, and it just kept it in place. It was fast enough where it didn't. 8 was something like
You
that.
can buy motors like
Yeah,
that.
well, he
Yeah.
built it. He built it so he
Or
could
take
put
a,
10 of them at a
rotisserie.
time.
Rotisserie.
Yeah, he did something. I forget what he did, but he showed me a picture of this device, which is, I loved it because he made 8 of them, and he could put 8 pieces on at a time and do it. So, any other questions?
The resin, did you say you bought it at this?
The resin I buy,
Jewelry place?
well, no, the resin I buy at East Coast Resins. Go online, East Coast Resin. The coloring is at Obsessions Resin, and I know they're in Gainesville. This one I believe is in Jersey. I buy it 4 gallons at a time. It's $169 plus shipping comes out to $205. So it's about $50 a gallon, $51 a gallon.
Yeah, one time you were using that resin at Home Depot.
Home Depot. Home Depot was $100 a gallon, and I'm still looking for a cheaper resin.
If you went to a boat supply place,
I've
were
looked
they at
online.
the 50-gallon drums?
50 is a little more. I'm looking for maybe
No.
5-gallon buckets or
And-
something.
and they
Even then,
would-
you need a spigot.
But that's fiberglass.
That's fiberglass. Yeah,
Oh.
this is epoxy resin.
That's epoxy, yeah. You're
Epoxy
right.
resin. And I use this one. It's crystal clear. There's a tabletop. They're all about the same, but this, I like the crystal clear. One thing when you're doing this, and if you get any wood flakes, if there might be some wood flakes in your hair or wherever, and it falls in there, just pick it out and wipe it off. Gloves are good. I like to wear the 9mm black rubber gloves, and you can reuse them, all right? Acetone isn't good for the gloves. I found that out. It does eat it. You get two wipes and then that's it. The other thing is mixing the resin. The more dye you put in there, the darker it's going to be. And sometimes darker isn't good if you want the stained glass effect. So that's something that you got to teach yourself how much of this stuff you want to put in. I generally figure like a drop, maybe an ounce.
So you can turn it opaque with that dye.
Yeah. So this, if you leave it with nothing, it's clear.
Right.
All right. Yellow is a good color.
Does the dye affect the curing process
No.
at all?
No.
Is that dye water soluble?
No, this is oil base.
Oil thing.
Oil base. When I first started doing it, the very first substance I used was chalk. My granddaughter left some, and on a whim, I was whipping up a batch of this, and I was going to put wood dust in it, and I saw the chalk, and I decided let me give it a shot, and it was beautiful. It gave me good color, but it wasn't the translucent. So I went and got some McCormick food coloring. That was okay, but over time, all right, because I have some pieces that I did with it, and if it's in the direct sunlight, like the piece in my truck, it's been in 5 years in direct sunlight, it goes clear after a while. The colors all vanish. This stuff I don't think will happen because it's oil base and is specifically made for it. But I've got a couple pieces that have been in the sun. I'll
What
let you
about
know.
aniline dye, powdered aniline dye?
They have that.
They
Yeah.
use that?
No, I only been using these too. And this stuff, after a while, it does gunk up and get really dry. Just open it up, pull off the cap, get your Chinese, when you go to the Chinese restaurant, always ask for 2 pair of Chinese sticks, one's to take home, because they're great tools in the shop, all right? Just take them, put them in there, and I pinch this down to the last, whatever I can get out of it. All right? And you don't have to drop it in the resin. You can just rub it up against the side up here, and then take the resin with the big stick and just rub it up against the dye. And once the dye's in it, it loosens it up. I've used it where it's chalky and cakey. It's just a matter of breaking it down and mixing it up.
Do you ever use a thinner on it?
Huh?
Do you ever use a thinner with it?
No thinner. Nope. Just what it is, and you don't want to play with it. And then just give it time.
Besides all the colors, then you get black.
I don't know if she has black. You go online, Obsessions Resin. There's like 8 colors that I've used that I find are good. Purple, I've had the same purple for the last 4 years. It's such a deep dye that one little drop can do like a whole 8 ounce and be perfect. So it's almost like I use a drop and then I scrape away a little bit and use it. It's very dark, and you'll learn about that. Teal is another one that can stretch itself. And magenta, pink, orange. So.
Can you mix the dyes for?
Yeah, you can, but it's not the greatest. It's not like paint where you do that. Most of the time, I just like to swirl them together. I just did a large hanging lamp, 18 inches, 6 inches tall. It's going to have 2 bulbs going horizontal, and then coming off the bottom, I'll put a rod about this much, and then I made a plastic disc, 12 inches, mostly yellow, because the light shines through it and it colors whatever comes on the other side of it, and then the greens, the blues, and the yellows, and then I'll place that in there as a, what do they call it? Diffuser. Right? So I just pour it into a big mold that I have, spray it with a mold releaser, and then just bang the crap out of it until...
Does the resin sand pretty much like the
The
wood?
resin sand's real good, real good.
I mean, it doesn't
Yeah.
go away faster or slower than...
No. I mean, if you have some little imperfect little nipples in it or dipples in it, you can go in one section of it and just hit it by itself, like you would with a regular piece of wood, or you can just keep doing the whole entire section. A lot of times I'll use my 2-inch sanding disc, Airmatic, and just hold a piece in a place if I have a large piece of plastic, and just sand it like that. If it's something that no one's going to touch, like a lamp, no one's going to touch, so I don't care that it's not perfect. But something like, well, this might be a lamp. I might turn it to, but a bowl, you want it to be perfect because somebody's going to hold it. Whereas a lamp's hanging up in this air, and no one's going to ever touch the darn thing. So.
When you sand that, you sand some kind of plastic and it's cloudy, but it doesn't. That doesn't do that with the resin.
No. When you start with the 80 grit, that'll just like you do with wood. You want to get all the imperfections, all the little orange peel looks in it, get that all smooth as the wood. And then I go to 120, 220, 320, 400, and then I look at it, and if I find a defect in the piece, I'll start the whole process over again. A lot of times you'll be sanding and you'll just overlook that little piece, you know, and then sometimes you'll finish the piece in place.
On the
that you-
plastic, have you ever played with finer grits? See, would it buff up or?
Oh, I've only gone to 400. 400 and then steel wool. I finished with steel wool, I found that good. I'm sure, you know, the more you polish it, the shinier it's gonna get. The best is when you get it, like the diffuser, all right? I'm not touching it. I'm just letting its natural shine to it. That's perfect. But, you know, we have to deal with it this way. So that's why I said when you're hitting it with your tool, chatter. Chatter is a killer. You want to get your tool rest as close as you can and use a small 1/4 inch gouge, and because you don't want that chatter. When you start chattering, means you have to cut in more and more, and before you know it, you've got no plastic and you've ruined your piece. So once you hit the plastic, it's a light touch, and you'll learn it. You'll just learn it, right? And if you don't, you'll hear a right? And you can hear the sounds. Once you don't hear any sound, then you know you've got it smooth. But when there's little scrapes in the plastic, you'll hear a right? And if there's a bump or a hole, you'll hear a clicking sound. It's exactly like wood, except it's a different pitch. Anybody else?
Question about the router. How do you adjust the depth for that, or is it just by eye?
Basically by eye. This one is about 1.25 inches on this router. Forget what size I left on here. Again, with the router, make sure your index is locked tight, real tight, and don't try to take the whole thing, all right? A piece like this one here, I probably swiped it 3 or 4 times, all right? You want to go slow and easy. If you don't, you're going to get a jump, and a jump means your lines here aren't going to be straight. They're going to have a little kick in it, and when your finished piece is done, you'll see that, because the resin will fill in where that little kick was. So just take your time. This side, don't worry about this side. We're moving everything. But your last 1/4 inch on this side is important, because this is the side that's going to end up on your piece. Everything here, you're going to cut away.
I've done a few things with using the router, and I found that if I start with a small pitch, like a pilot, it runs through it. Take it as a larger one, it runs smoother.
You could do that, all right? With me, I look at it like I'm doing 8 slices, so if I did that, I'd have to go back and do the thing 16 times, all right? I mean, yeah, you could do it. What he's saying is, instead of making one big slice, start with a skinnier one, make a skinnier one, then another one, and this way you're cutting away less wood, and your outside cut, which is the important cut, not the center cut, is going to be smoother, and you're not going to get that. What I've found over practice is if I tighten down my index so that this piece is stiff, and I just slowly cut with the router 4 times, generally is enough.
Taking a lighter cut then?
Yes, I'm taking a very light cut.
Okay.
All right, maybe 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch, just cutting it 3-4 times. Again, with the elbows, all right, this one, it's going to wrap around, it's going to look real pretty with petals. When you hit the elbow, will go through, and you'll have to tape it. And then I put tape over tape. You'll find that the stuff leaks. I would say at least 50% of the pieces I make leak at the beginning, and then what's good is once it leaks, you go ahead and give it this, mix it around so it coats everything on the inside, and if there are any other little air holes, whatever, they'll hopefully get sealed up, and then when you do your next pour, it should be solid, and you won't have that problem again. But once it starts to leak, just walk away. That's why you need the tray, because if you do this on a table and it starts to leak, even though you're only talking 4 or 5 ounces, it's it's going to go flat, and then it's going to find the edge, and then it's going to get on your floor. It's messy. I got to tell you, it's messy, and if you do it, just protect yourself. That's another thing. Like I said, I wear the whole shield, and I've been hitting the chest. I don't wear a jacket or anything, so I'm just wearing a t-shirt like this, and I felt the plastic hitting me. Okay? And especially when you're doing the little cup, if there's a piece of tape, under the cup and you resined over the tape, when you hit it, it's just going to pop right off. And I've been hitting the mask with those, and so protect yourself: hands, face, lungs. This little baby, I forgot where I got it. Craft Supply. It's like $80, $90. Huh?
For the sled?
For the sled. It comes with a sled and the router. You can buy the router on Amazon once they burn out, and they will burn out. The bushings burn out on them. 100 hours, that's all you get on most of your equipment today. You get 100 hours, you're fine.
Does that sled actually,
This one is set up for, when you buy it, you have to tell them what size lathe you have. All right? I have an 8-inch or 16-inch, well, it's 16 and then it goes to 32 when I take the weigh out of the robust. So this is set for 8 inches, and then it comes with a table that it sits on. All right? So you add the table and this, and the table is this thick, and the table bolts on. I did away with the table. It was too small, so I just took some plywood, same thickness, clamps, and mine now sticks out a little bit farther because I use bigger pieces. And even with when I take the weigh out of my piece, and I'm doing, say, a 22-inch bowl or something, and I want to cut into it, I'll hook my weigh on the side and then clamp the table on the side of it. So it's a handy little tool.
so a table attaches to your weigh?
The table
and that's
bolts to the
table,
weigh,
and that's
and it sits on the table.
That's free movement.
Free movement. And your hands are holding this thing, and you just slowly cut across. Like anything else, keep your tool, I buy a new set of these like every 6 months. They wear out. It's for $29. Cheaper than sending them out to get them sharpened, and to spend the time sharpening it, to me, it just isn't worth it. So I'd rather just buy a new set. But if you're going to make the lines going up and down, you want a fluter or a pencil, air-powered Dremel pencil. Okay? And then you can buy the saber-tooth grinders. Burrs, the little burrs, you can buy those. You got the straight one, the ball, cone-shaped. Personally, I like the straight one and the ball, and the little tubular one that's a little thicker for making my lines.
Have you found a minimum size line you can use, or?
Yeah, if you go any smaller than a 1/4 inch, you can't go with the mixed colors. You don't get them flowing. I like to try to make most of my lines 1/2 inch, so that you can put 2 different colors and they can flow through to each other. But yeah, the small lines, this is about the smallest I'll go. I think this one is the 3/8.
Looks like that.
That's it. And it depends. Like, I'm just finished the piece this was doing. I had 16 lines running on it. It was 13 inches in diameter. So I multiplied that by 3.145, which is pi. Everybody knows pi. We just had it the other day. And that'll give you the circumference of your bowl. And then you can divide that by how many lines you're going to make. And then you can see, do I want 2 inches going to look good, or should I go to 4 inches? And depending on the size of the piece, it depends on how many petals I want to make. So I use math all the time.
Pedals or on
Huh?
Do you do even or odd number petals?
Always has to be a divisible by 48 pegs. So it has to be divisible by 2, 4, 6, 8, 12, 16, 24. Those are how many, 24 and 48. So those are how many lines. Always even number of lines. If you do an odd number, you're not going to be even unless you do 3. Three about the only way you're going to do it evenly and have it look good. I've done it where I've done 4 lines here, and the rest of the bowl just plain bowl, just because I wanted to see what it looked like. It looked pretty good. Somebody else liked it too, so that meant both of us had good taste. But they're very pretty. I mean, try it. At least try it one time. It's going to be messy. Use the trays. Call me if you've got any questions. And
What's the smallest size can you buy? That's a gallon. I always
oh, you can go to Home Depot
Oh,
and buy theirs. They have 16-ounce.
okay.
So you buy in a quart. All right, which like this bowl here will probably use maybe 16 ounces. I went a little thick and I went a little, each one of these is probably maybe an ounce. So you got 8 of them, that's 8 ounces, not maybe 10 ounces in this whole thing. That's if it doesn't leak. If it leaks, well then it'll use a lot more, So. And sometimes if you're lucky and it starts to leak and it's like the first or second bowl that you poured, you can collect all that and pour it into another bowl that might not leak. So try to use the stuff, this is costing me, figure it out, 48 cents, 45 cents an ounce. So when you pour in a bowl that has 8 ounces, you got $3, $4. When you pour in a big bowl, I poured bowls that have had a half a gallon of resin. All right, a big 22-inch bowl with 16 lines, and the lines were 1 inch thick, and that's what stayed in the bowl. That one didn't leak, so I got lucky on that. But 70% of it ends up on the floor because you're going from that ½ inch down to 1/4 inch or even less. So, any other questions? Remember, when you do it, just call me. Be safe.
Okay.